Then let's start. We are going to talk about using Spring 4, the most recent version of Spring framework. And Spring itself is the most popular framework for Java development nowadays. Together with AngularJS, and we will be look at the creation of REST-based web applications. So what I have selected for the technologies which we will talk about. Let me show you on presentation. What I have selected is the other most popular technologies nowadays. So I have collected the most popular technologies and put it into the same application. Because nowadays, most developers are creating web applications. It is working everywhere on mobile phones and on any computer with the browser. And the most popular Java framework is Spring. The most popular web framework is AngularJS. And the most popular way of communication between server and client, the most popular protocol for nowadays is REST. So I put all these technologies into the same application, and we will talk about how it can be used all together. And the reasons why these technologies are the most popular are not just there. Because it happened for some reason, but because these technologies are rather feature-rich, and these technologies are mature, and this means that we can rely on these technologies in building of really serious applications. So we will discuss all of these technologies one by one. The first one is Spring Boot. Spring Boot is the feature of the newest Spring framework versions, which allows to very quickly start and create and execute the simple Spring application. So it allows to start from the scratch very quickly, and on the other side, it allows to configure your application if you need it, and it doesn't limit you in the complexity of your application. So you can start from the simple Spring Boot application, and later you can change it, and it will be a full-featured application. Then we will talk about REST. What is the REST? AngularJS and Spring Data. So let's go through our I have questions. Most questions I will be answering in the end, and something maybe I will look during my presentation. So I see the question, why is AngularJS is the most popular while the jQuery is. Actually, jQuery is not framework, and the purposes of these frameworks are different. AngularJS is the full-featured MVC framework, and jQuery is just the library which simplifies the work with the DOM model and the usual approach of creating of web applications. So, and AngularJS is the full-featured and big framework. And we will start from the Spring Boot part, and let's look at the very simple Spring Boot application. You can see here that we are creating class sample controller, and in this sample controller we are using the annotations. Spring 4 is completely configured via annotations, and we do not need to do anything in XML configuration, and we are telling that this class is a controller and it should use all the default configurations just by using enable auto configuration. And another one thing is that we have to execute this application. We are telling that we should execute Spring application, and we have only one controller method here. When user will go to the root sub path of our site, yes, to localhost. If we have executed it on localhost, this method will be running, and response body means that the text which we return from this method will be returned in the same way to the user. So it will be unchanged and just sent to the user in the same way. Typically, in more complicated scenarios, we should apply some template and we should use some view, and in this case we are just returning hello world. And this is very simple application, and it's very easy to run it. We just have to go to console and print mvn spring boot run, and this will start this application. Spring boot run will execute Tomcat server, which is built into Spring Boot, and you will be able to go to localhost and to see how it is working. So we will look at it, but a little bit later, because we will do our own very simple application together with Spring Boot and AngularJS. And to communicate between client part and server part, we will be using REST API. REST API become very popular. There were many ways of how the application, the server part and client part can communicate, and there were much more sophisticated protocols. But REST API became very popular because of its simplicity. It is completely simple, and what it is doing, that you are just using the plain HTTP URLs, and for example, here is the list of the methods: get, post, get, put, delete, which allows to perform the basic CRUD operations. Get allows to retrieve some data, post allows to add some data, get allows this get is the same, put allows to update the data, and delete allows to delete the data. So this is the basic CRUD operations: create, read, update, and delete. And we are able, with the using of REST API, we are able to use the same URL for different operations. For example, we can go to some site /tasks, and if we're using get HTTP method, we will get the result which will be retrieved. And also, if we need to add some task, we can post to the same URL. So we are using always the same URL. And if we need to retrieve some concrete task by its ID, we can use get tasks/ID. And it allows this simple API allows to create the very simple way, the very simple protocol of how the client can talk to the server. And another thing I can tell about the REST API, that in addition to using various HTTP methods, we can define what we want to get. So client defines three things. It defines the URL, and the URL can be used for different things actually, but for the same entity. So here we are working with entity tasks. Then we are defining what do we want to do. So this is like verb. We define that we want to get data or post data or put or delete data. And the third thing we tell to the server is the format in which we want to get the data. For example, we can go to the same URL tasks and use the same get method, but we can retrieve the data in different representation. For example, we can get the list of tasks in the plain text, or in HTML, or in XML form, or in JSON. JSON is the most popular for now way of communication between client and server. So we have only one URL and we can use it in various ways. And this is very simple and standard way of communicating. And that's why, because of its simplicity, it became so popular. So we will be using REST API. And if we're using REST architecture, we will be using on the client HTML5 and AngularJS, and they will be do all the operations on the level of client. And this will be feature-rich application because it will be do all the interactions with the user, and the only thing we will put into the server is communicating and retrieving the data. All the processing of the data will be done on the client side. All the processing and representation of the data. For sure, in this architecture, some complicated mechanisms of data retrieving or some complicated business logics anyway should better be put into the server. Because in client, everything is opened, and we most probably wouldn't want to show all the business logics, and because if we are using JavaScript, then all the code can be visible for the end user. And for sure, Java is more appropriate language for creating the complicated business logics. However, all the other things, all the other tasks can be done in AngularJS. For contemporary web applications, it's about 50 or even 80% of the functions is working with user, supporting user and processing, providing the convenient interface for the user. And that's why the part of the application resided on the client is rather big. Okay, what does Angular provide for us? Angular provides the MVC concept implementation. So we have a model, which is the data which we are retrieving from the server. And we have controller. Controller is the special object which contains all the processors of user interactions. So if, for example, user is clicking the button or doing something, then the controller method is executed. And the view is the representation of the data from the model for the user. So AngularJS is supporting the template generation, and it will get the data from the model and generate it and send it to the user. So by using the templates, we are able to very simplify the creating of the complicated web pages. Because if we're using the plain DOM model and we're trying to do manipulations on the level of the DOM, of the HTML, then when our application is becoming quite complicated, it's very difficult to support and change it. And this separation makes the application much more easy to support and understandable. And with this approach, we have the fixed architecture. Because if we are using our homegrown approach, architecture, then different applications have different architectures, and it's difficult to look at the application and to understand how it is working. And if we are using Angular application, it have the fixed architecture, so it simplifies the joining of new developers to the team and understanding of the existing Angular application. And for business, it's the most critical, because typical application have to be supported during 5 or 10 years by different developers. And the important feature of AngularJS is the synchronization of the view and the model, the automatical synchronization of the view and the model. In AngularJS, the view is the representation of data to the user. So user get the data, and the data is generated on the base of the model. And typically, if we are using not Angular, but some library like jQuery, we have to manually read the data from the view. For example, the user have entered something into the input field, and then we have to find this input field in the DOM model and get the value of this field. And only after that we can do some operations. And the vice versa, if we need to show some data to the user, we have to find the element and put data to the element, to the input element. And what is Angular doing? It is synchronizing, automatically synchronize the view and the model. So if you are changing some data in the view, for example, you are changing some input box, then automatically the model get changed. And we do not need to read and to do anything with DOM model and the view. We are only at the creators of the controllers. We are only working with the model, and it simplifies the programming, the development, and allows the clean separation of the model and the view. And controller is working only with the model. It doesn't synchronize anything. It doesn't read from the model and put data to the view. It's only working with the model, and model is automatically synchronized to the view. And it is done by using the special variable scope. $scope is the glue for the controller and view. So all the data which we want to show on the view have to reside inside the scope variable. And controller have the access to the scope variable, and the view is reading data from the scope variable. And if some data is changed by the user into the view, for example, some input box data is entered, then the scope will be automatically updated. And if controller is changing some data inside the scope, the view is automatically updated. So let's look. The next thing is dependency injector. One of the most unpleasant things in JavaScript is the global scope, because JavaScript is working with the global scope, and it's we need to do some additional actions to make the scope it is using more narrow, because working is in the with the global scope is not safe. And what we are doing here is just putting the data, putting the name of the services into the parameters of the controller. So here, let's look. We are defining some controller. This is the way how we can define the controller. We are telling that we define controller, and its name is phone list controller, and this is the function which will be executed in case if user will click the button or do something inside the web page. And this controller will automatically get variables scope and HTTP just because these variables are listed into the list of parameters. And it is done by dependency injector. Angular is looking at their names, and it will inject scope and HTTP. Scope is the variable which is used for synchronization with the view, and scope have to be always injected into the controller. And HTTP is the special service which allows to perform AJAX calls and communicate with the server. Can we pass HTTP keyword directly to service? Yes, we can pass it to service if we are creating the separate service. But here we are showing that we are just using controller. In more complicated scenario, we are able to create the separate service. Oh, sorry. We can use the separate service for retrieving data and keeping data. And in this way, HTTP service shouldn't be injected into the controller. Instead, we will inject it into the service and our custom service. And then we will inject our custom service to our controller. But this is for more complicated scenarios. And another one thing what I wanted to discuss is to compare the traditional approach with the server-side MVC framework and the new approach with client-side MVC framework. So traditionally, we have a very thin client which only contains browser and browser only shows the content. Actually, having the browser in nowadays means that we are having the full-featured platform. And browsers are nowadays even the same or more complicated than operating system. So in this scenario, we are using only the part of the possibilities of the browser, and this is traditional model. And on the server side, we are doing all the operations, and we are getting here the request. For example, user is clicking some button, and the request goes to the server, and then it is processed on the server, and server is having some MVC framework. It is having model, and it is having controller, and then it is generating the view as HTML, and only then it is sending it to the browser. And in our what are the drawbacks of this approach? The first drawback is that we are putting all the load to the server, and it means that this server is heavy loaded in the case of the big number of connected users. And also, we are able to work only in scenario when we are connected to the server, and it's not possible to use the application if we are going offline. And actually, this model is not very simple, especially if we are trying to add some features to the client. This is typical that we are using some rather complicated MVC on the server, but we are trying to make the client more interactive. And in this case, we're starting to use some Ajax, and it makes the work with this Ajax and the common approach very natural and stochastic. And if we will look at the putting MVC only to the client, we will see the much more simple model. In this case, we are putting everything, controller and view, to the client, and it allows all the data to be rendered, all the HTML to be rendered on the client, and all the user input be interacted, be processed on the client. And the only thing which is sent over the network is the model, is the data. So the data is exchanging. For sure, it's not possible to keep all the data on the client, and sometimes we will need shared data with other users of the application. So we are having on the client only the data which we need, and all the rest data are stored on the server. And in this architecture, we are getting much better scalability because we are loading client browsers much more, and we are unloading, we are putting less to the server, and it leads to the better scalability. Then we are having much better user response because all the methods to work with the users are resided on the client side, and it allows to do the very clean programming model. And it allows even to create the offline applications with the use of this approach, because it is possible to use local storage on the side of browser and to do the synchronization with the server only in the moments when the server is actually connected, and in other time it's possible to work in offline mode, but it have to be specially developed. So in this model, we are having, in traditional model, we are having only the view on the client side, and controller and model are resided on the server side. And in the JavaScript MVC, we are having view and controller and some of the model too on the client side. And then we're using HTTP plus REST for interaction. And on the server side, we're having only the model. For sure, we also will need some controllers, but these controllers will be working only with the data, not with the views. And these controllers will be only take some part of the server-side model and send it to the user, and then do the back task, get the data from the user and update the model on the server side. So here you can see the data flow of the modern web application. So user is seeing the view, and we're having controller on the client side and model on the client side. And if we want that application to support the offline mode, we can also do synchronization with in-browser store, local storage, and it allows to keep a rather big amount of data, and it's enough for storing all the data in offline mode and to upload it only when the server will go online. And then the model is synchronized, model on the client side is synchronized by using HTTP plus REST with the controller on the server side, and controller is getting the data from the model and put it to the model on the server side. And back, if we need the data from the server side, we are reading the data from the model, and it is sent over HTTP plus REST, and it is coming to the model on the client side. So this is the most convenient and contemporary architecture. And just a couple of words more about AngularJS. AngularJS is the most popular MVC framework. So this, you can see the analysis of amount of questions on stackoverflow.com on for the various MVC frameworks, and you can see that AngularJS is 3 times more popular than the closest contemporary Backbone.js. And you can see that the popularity of AngularJS is getting very fast up. This is the comparison of amount of requests, search requests in the Google. So you should understand that this is Google statistics, and AngularJS is Google framework. But if we will believe these statistics, we can see that AngularJS is actually becoming more and more popular. And actually, AngularJS is becoming now the standard MVC framework for JavaScript development. The same standard as we are using jQuery. For now, jQuery is the standard, and several years ago there was some other libraries, for example, Prototype and Dojo and others, and nowadays the jQuery is actually the standard. And when we are need some DOM manipulations, we always using jQuery because it is full-featured and quick and good supported. And the same is for AngularJS. By disk and data flow, you refer on server. Disk, I have a question. Disk, this means that database, it is database, and database is typically stored on the disk. That's nothing more. Okay, and now we look at the application example. And the first application I will show is moment. I will do font a little bigger. Java editor. Oh, okay. Now we have it rather big. So we have a very simple application here, and I will show how it is working. We have the application, and this class is only defined that this is application and this is Spring Boot application. By using this annotation, we tell to Spring Boot that this application have to be executed as a Spring Boot application with all the defaults. Also, we are having the greeting. The greeting is some Java bean, which is having ID and content, and the simple getters and the simple constructor. So you can see this is an immutable class because the properties are final and we do not have any setters. And we are having a greeting controller. Greeting controller is performing the operations on the server side, and what it is doing. You can see we are having template and counter. Counter is using atomic long so that our application is thread safe. And when user will go to /greeting, then this method will be executed. And you can see that the data for parameters here is getting from the request. This is the request param. With the value name, we can send the name and the default value. So if there is no param specified here, then the world text should be used. And here is the name of the parameter of this method. So what we're doing here, we're creating the new instance of the greeting class. The first parameter is the next counter value by using thread safe atomic long, and the next is the result of applying the name to the template. So we will have hello world if we do not have the name, or hello something, somebody, if the name will be specified here. And you can see that we are defining this class as REST controller. By this way, we are telling to Spring that it have automatically create the REST controller. So it will be working like REST controller, and when we will be going to this URL, we will get information. And if we're using REST controller, you can see from this method we are returning greeting. And this greeting, in the case of REST controller, is automatically converted into the JSON, which can be read on the client side by JavaScript. So we are returning Java object, Java instance of greeting, and on the client side, we will get the greeting as the JSON, and it will be we will be able to read it. So let's execute this program. For execution, you can see I'm in the folder where we can execute it, and I am typing command mvn spring boot run, and we can see the process of execution, and it have executed the Spring Boot, and it have executed the built-in Tomcat web server. So now let's go to the URL, appropriate URL. So the URL will be localhost 8080 because it is by default. It's no, I will go to greeting, localhost 8080/greeting. By default, the server is running on 8080 port, and we are going to the greeting, and you can see this is the result. I will do it bigger. So this is the result of this call. So we are just going to this URL and we are performing GET request because the standard request by browser is GET request. and we are getting the content of greeting in the JSON form, and it can be readable by any JavaScript application. This is for now. This is nothing about AngularJS. We are just getting the data by using REST, and it can be easily used together with Ajax technology. And now let's go to the next part. Let's look at index.html. So you can see here is the very simple application based on AngularJS. So the first thing we have to define is that this is the Angular application. You can see this by using this attribute. We are telling that everything inside HTML is Angular application. Then we have to attach the AngularJS library. Here is the URL to AngularJS, and we are attaching our own file with JavaScript, which is hello.js. And the next thing we are doing is we are defining the controller. So we define that the controller for our for this part of the page is named hello. And you can see there are some input fields, input for name, and then we are having the button, update, and some text. So this is this text is the template, and greeting ID will be used. These double figure brackets is the text which will be substituted, and this greeting ID will be retrieved from the server, and it will be substituted to here. And the same for greeting content. So we will get the text. The ID is the ID, and the content is what we have get from the server. And let's look at how hello.js is looking like. Here is the hello.js. The moment I will make also the font bigger. No, it didn't help. JavaScript text font. Strange. It should be big. Why it doesn't? Okay, I hope you can see it in this text font also. So what we are having here is the function hello, and the name of the function is the same as the name of the controller here. The hello is the same as the name of this function. So this function is used as the controller for this part of HTML. And in this function, we are having injected two parameters, scope and HTTP. Scope will be used to synchronize data with the view, and HTTP will be used for accessing the server side. And what we're doing here is using Ajax call. We're using HTTP server. And we're using get method, HTTP get method, and we are accessing greeting path. So it will be greeting or /greeting. So we are going to the same server as we are running and /greeting. And this is the parameter we are passing, data, name, and this is the result which we get from the server. You can see here we are using the default object. So actually the HTTP GET is returning the promise, and we are defining the callback not as the one more function parameter as in jQuery, but as the separate processor for success. Actually, jQuery is nowadays also supporting this. So this is the use of the promise, and AngularJS is working only with the promises. And here, in case of the success, getting the results from the server, we will have the data returned into the function, into the data parameter, sorry. And what we're doing here is we are setting scope greeting to the value of the data. So you can see we are just setting scope greeting to data, and all the rest of the magic is done by AngularJS. Because when we are setting greeting to data, the greeting is automatically synchronized with the view, and the greeting ID and the greeting content will be automatically updated. We do not have to do anything here. We are just changing scope.greeting. And here, Angular is accessing greeting by using the current scope. So actually, this is like scope.greeting.id and scope.greeting.content. Another one thing, so let's look at the interface. So that, I guess I did it too big. So you can see the ID is 3 and the content is hello world. And if we will enter some name, for example, John, we'll press update, and we can see the ID is 4 and the content is hello John. Hello John is generated from our Java backend, and this is rendered template. So you can see the ID is 4 and the content is greeting content. So what we are having here, that we are sending synchronous requests to the server, to greeting page, and we are also passing the name, and we are getting the data from the server, and we are setting greeting here. And also we are having the update button. What happens when we are pressing update button? We have entered here the name of the person, for example, John, and are pressing update button. You can see what is happening here. The name is synchronized with the name into the scope. And here, in case of this button is get pressed, the update method is being executed. So it is implicitly execute scope.update method. Scope.update. And here you can see the update method, what it is doing. It is this function is get executed here, and HTTP GET greeting is executed by using params scope name. So this data is get from the scope name. It automatically, when the user is changing something here, for example, entering John, the scope.name is automatically updated. And when the scope update is executed, we do not need to get it from the UI. We are just able to use it. And we are passing it to the server in the params. And this is the callback. When we get information from server, we are just putting scope greeting to data. So name value is stored in global scope. No, name is not stored in global scope. I guess you mean this code. Actually, this is not what we're doing here. This is the same because nothing is sent to the server actually. This is just by mistake. So what we're doing here is just go to greeting, and we do not pass any name by default, because this code is get executed in the moment when the application is loaded the first time. So if we are going to this page, here we get the ID is 5 and the content is hello world, and this code is working in this moment. You can see Angular is starting the application, and when it is finding the controller function, it is executing it. And when it is get executed, it goes to the server, and it is retrieving greeting from the server and put it to the scope, and then the template is automatically updated. So this happens when we're just going to the main page. And when we are pressing update button or pressing enter on the form, we are doing another one request, and this one is the request, and here we are reading data from the scope. Okay, and now let's look at at a little bit more complicated application. Okay, and we will be using the Spring Data. Spring Data is another one new sub-framework for the Spring, which allows the very simple access to the application, to the database. And how it is working. This is based on the concept which the first time appeared in the Ruby, and after all it spread it to various other languages. And the idea here behind it is that we are able to use some standard methods for manipulating the entity. For example, saving entity, finding entity, find one entity by its ID, finding all, count entity, delete, and so on. So we are just able to use the standard implementation, and we do not need every time to implement the same methods for every entity. If we have some entity, we are just using the standard methods, and we have to implement only something which is not standard. Here is the implementation of this idea. Spring Data is implementing this idea, and here you can see how we can create the repository automatically by using Spring Data. So we define the name of the repository. For example, here we define that person repository is the repository. It is extending repository, and it will be working with user entities, and the IDs will be stored in the format of long. And below you can see the list of various find methods. So if we define the person repository this way, it means that it already have got all the standard methods like save, find one, find all, count from the repository implementation, and we do not have to implement it. However, it's not possible to implement all the find methods for all situations. And for this aim, Spring is analyzing the name of the finder. We are defining interface. We are not defining the implementation. And Spring data will provide the implementation for us. For example, if we are putting here the method find by email address and last name, Spring will automatically analyze the name of this method, and it will be create the finder, which will be find the persons. In our case, person is the superclass for user. That's why we are getting person here, and here we are defining user. So we are automatically get the method which will be find the person by its email address and last name. And the same way we can define various other methods like find distinct people by last name or first name. So it means that Spring will automatically generate the appropriate code which will be looking for the last name or first name, and it will also apply distinct operation on the found data. And for example, find by last name ignore case is allowing Spring to generate method which will be looking for the person by its last name, and the case will be ignored. And many other alike methods are possible. And we do not have to create these methods. We are just have to specify the names of these methods into the interface, and then implementation will be provided by the Spring. And here you can see the supported keywords in the methods. For example, we are able to use AND keyword, like find by last name and first name, or keyword, and it will generate the appropriate JPQL. This means Java Persistence Query Language, which is SQL-like. If you do not know JPA, it is very SQL-like, but it operates on the objects instead of tables. And you can see between, for example, find by start date between means that we are able to specify the range of the dates from and to dates, and it will find all the dates between this range, and less than allows to find by the age, which is less than something, and find by start date after allows to find by date which is bigger than some date, and many other, this is the next page, many other various methods which allows to automatically get methods generated. By using this approach, by using Spring data, we are able to rely on automatical code generation, and we are able to rely on the standard methods for entity manipulations, and we almost do not need to write any code to create the repository. For sure, for complicated situations, we still need to write the code, but only for these situations, not the standard code. And let's look at the example. This is the Notes application. So you can see this is the main class here, the main class of this application, and we define this that this class is the Spring configuration. So here the bin is created. This means that we are using, instead of standard Spring Spring context, we are defining Java-based configuration, and this file is used as Java-based configuration. And here we define the bin of type of type command line runner and with the name init. And actually this is just the standard Spring Boot approach to execute some code on application startup. And what we're doing here is just define some default data for testing purposes. And let's look at our domain model. First of all, we have the class user. And what we're doing? Is the nodes application. So we will be storing nodes for different users. So we have the user entity, which will keep information about user. We are keeping here ID and username and password. And password, you can see we're using JSON ignore annotation, which means that when we will be sending data to the server, password will not be sent. And to the client, the password will not be sent to the client. And here we have the list of nodes for this user, and it is mapped by user, and it is one-to-many relationship. So one user and many nodes for each user. And let's look at the node. Node is also the entity, and if we're loading node, then we do not want to send the user with the node. Node has the link to the user. However, when we are sending the list of nodes of the user, we are not putting the data about user to the node, because otherwise this will be endless loop. Because node will have the user will have nodes, and each node will have the user, and so on. And we have the many-to-one relationship, many nodes to one user here. Then we have ID and text of the node here. So the model is quite simple. And let's look at the repositories. The first one is the user repository. So you can see we are using JPA repository as the base class, and it is using user as the entity and long as the type of the ID. And we have the method find by username. It will be automatically generated, and it will return the optional user value. Optional is the feature, the standard class for Java 8, and we will discuss it a little bit later. So find by username will generate code which will find the user by the username passed as parameter. And node repository is extending JPA repository too, and it is finding nodes by the username, find by username. By username, you should see why we are using this text here, but find by username. This is because we are creating the repository for the node. And if you will go to the node, you can see here we do not have username. If we was writing find by username, then Spring Data will not be able to generate the method because there is no find by username. And instead of it, we are having the user, and inside user, we are having username. So what we can tell to Spring Data to automatically generate the code which will be go to node, and then find its user property and go to the username of the user. So it will be automatically generated, and it will find all the nodes for this user. And let's look how the nodes controller is looking like. So you can see, for example, here is the URL for the controller, localhost, this is the name of the server, and then the name of the user, and here is the REST path for the nodes. And you can see first of all, we are defining that this class is the REST controller. We define that these have to be treated as REST controller, and we are mapping all the methods inside this controller to the URL username. Username will be analyzed and it will be accessible from the methods. For this case, username is Vladson, and nodes. So anything which is starting from the server name / something, which will be analyzed as username, then nodes will lead the control to this controller. Will get us to this controller. And you can see that repositories are automatically injected by the Spring. We are just need to to tell Spring that these properties have to be auto-wired, and we are implementing for the same URL. We are implementing two methods. The one method will be reading nodes from the database and send it to the user, and another one will be getting nodes and add it to the database. So the reading nodes is quite simple. This username variable is read from the path. That's why we have to specify here the path variable annotation, which will tell that username have to be retrieved from the path. This is the username. And what we're doing here is just find by username. We are just using the already generated method. And that's all. We define that this is also the method which is binded to the same URL, because we do not specify any other URL, and this means that this URL will be used for this method. And by default, the get method will be used here. And here we can see the add node method, which will get the data in case if we are posting data from the client. We are posting the node, and you can see here is the username which we get from path variable, and then we specify the node, and this node of type node will be automatically converted from the JSON, because from JavaScript we will send the JSON and it will be automatically converted into Java object and injected into this parameter. And also what we are telling that this node is resided into the request body. So all the request body is occupied with node. And this is the necessary annotation which allows to read the data and to convert it from JSON from the body of the request. And another one annotation is valid, which allows to automatically validate the node. Here we are not showing how the node can be validated, but you can use the validation annotations. And for example, here you can put some annotations to limit the text in size. For example, you can define the max length. Okay, I will not do it now, but anyway, you can define the validations parameters, and then this node will be automatically validated, and you will be able to get the results of this validation. Okay, and what we're doing here, we are using user repository, and we're using find by username method. You remember that find by username method was returning optional result. And it means that when we get this result, we have to get the actual result here. Optional class allows to perform various operations. It allows to just to get data. It will return null in case if data was not retrieved, or it will return the data. This is just the usual approach, and we can define our custom behavior in case if the data was absent here, and if we didn't get the data. And here we define that if the username was not found, so we're trying to get the user by its username, and if the user was not found, then we will throw this user not found exception. Here we are using lambda expression. So we want to get the user by its username. Otherwise, if user was not found, we are throwing user not found exception and passing username to the user. And also we are setting user because we have found the user, and we node which we get from the client side doesn't have the user set, so we are setting the user, and we are saving the node into the database by using node repository. And here we are defining some mock data. We are just define some nodes for blood-zone, and add some test node for blood-zone, and create another one user, and also add the test node. And we are executing application. So that's all for the server-side part. And let's look at the client-side part for now. What we're having here is the nodes application, and let's we execute it and look how it is working. So I'm breaking here, and I'm going to moment. I'm going to the root folder for this application. So here it is. And then we are executing MVN Spring Boot. So the Spring has been executed now. And let's look at how this application is working. So here is the simple interface for adding the nodes. Here is this simple node. By default, we are defining user as blood-zone, and we can redefine it. This is BVV, and by default, by default we're using blood-zone, and then we get the test node, and if we enter another one user, for example VVV, then you can see VVV node, and we are able to add some also nodes here, another node, and add it. So you can see this is one more node, and if we are not specify any name, then we are getting the list of the nodes just for the default user. The default user is blood-zone here. So this is very simple interface, and let's look at how it is implemented. So we have the application My App, and we are defining the Angular JavaScript library and also Angular resource. Angular resource is used for working with the REST. We will be using the special REST API of AngularJS, and also we are attaching Node.js, our JavaScript file. And we define that our body is processed by the nodes controller, and here we define the form the same way as in the previous example. We just define username and attach it to the scope by defining ng model as username here. We define the button, update button, and on click it will be execute scope.update. And also what we are doing here is define the list of the nodes. So we are using here the ng-repeat directive, which will be iterate over nodes. So it will retrieve the scope.nodes, and it will iterate over the nodes, and for each node it will show this content, node ID and node text. So you can see that this is node ID, node text, then the next node ID, node text. This is the implementation of for inside Angular. So you are just using ng-repeat directive and define what will be the name of the variable on each iteration and what collection we are iterating. And here is the add node. The same way we are attaching the scope to this text area, and we are attaching add method to the add node button. Now let's look at Nodes.js. Here you can see the controller. So the first thing we are doing here is that we are defining the model. We define that we are using my app model, and also we need to use ng resource. This is the additional model which allows us to use the RESTful services. And here you can see we define for model, we define the factory. Factory will be creating the ways to access the REST services, and we define here the factory node, and node will be the object which will be able to use for creating the nodes and saving the nodes. And here we are using resource as the parameter, and resource will be automatically injected. This is actually the resource is actually the part of the ng resource library, and resource is the service which will be automatically rejected here, and we are using resource service here. We define the URL for the REST requests, and we define the standard parameter. We are sending with each REST request, we are sending also username. This username will be read from the scope. It means that we are going to read the username from the scope, and this username will be put here. So this username from the scope will be will substitute this username. And after that, we are defining the controller. So for this model, we defined factory with the name node, and now we defined controller with the name nodes controller. And for nodes controller, we need scope. We are always need scope here, and we need node. Node is the factory which just created. We define here the standard URL which will be used to access the data, and you can see we define URL as the object with username equal to scope username, or otherwise flat zone. So in case if scope username is empty, it doesn't have data. If we have not entered anything into the username input field, then scope username will be empty and we will be using lots on. So this is the standard JavaScript syntax. If this condition is false, then we are using this. Okay, so URL will contain the function which will return the actual object for the username. And let's look how we are using it. The first thing we are doing is using update method. You can see we are just executing it from this function. And what we'll be doing update method, it is this is just logging, and then it is retrieving data from the server side. How it is doing it? The factory, the resource service have created the node. The node is a special object which contains the method query. And we're using this method, query method, and this query method allows to retrieve data from the server. And here we are passing the additional parameters. The additional parameter in our case is username. We are passing the username. So node.query will go to this URL and retrieve the data. And after that, it will return the result. And this result will be written to scope.nodes. And the interface, the list of nodes, will be automatically updated. So what we're doing here, and we are updating it on the first execution. And also we define the scope update. This is the event handler for the update button, this one. When this button will be pressed, the update method, update function will be executed. So when we are pressing update, these nodes are retrieved from the server and shown on this page. And the last one thing is adding the node. How it is implemented. If we want to add the node, we are adding the node. For example, we are pressing this button, and this button will execute method scope.add. Scope.add is implemented here. How it is working? It is creating the new node by using the same object. So node, the resource service, the resource function have created the node constructor, and we are able to execute it by using new node, and we get the node. After that, we are able to define the parameters of the node and read it from the scope. So we define node text. It will be scope text. So text is the name of this text area. So node will have text, and then we are execute the method save. So here we executed method query, and here we are executing method save. What will do the method save? It will go to this URL by using REST, and it will be using post method, post HTTP method. It will apply these additional parameters. Here we are passing the current username. So the current username will be substituted here. And here we define the callback function. After the server will return the result, we are clearing up the scope, and we are executing update again. Update to show the newly added node. So this is how it is working. Using the resource is helping to implement the standard approach of working with REST services into AngularJS. And we have reviewed the full application, which is based on the technologies I have listed. You can get the details of our presentation on this site. Moment. Here is the name of the site, http://vladson.ucoz.com/rest. REST should be used with capital letters only this way, because it doesn't work with lowercase letters. So you will go to this page, and here are the presentation, and here you can download the first example, greeting zip, and you can download greetings is the first application I was showing you. Another one application I was showing you is notes.zip. This is what we was looking at now. And the one more thing I offer you to do is to look at this document, adding features to notes. This is a self-work for yourself, practice work. And it's always much better to have some practice with the application to better understand how it is working. These are very simple and quick exercises just to have a little bit practice. So what you have to do here, these are described all the steps. What you have to do. The first thing you have to do is adding the node date. So for this aim, you have to add the date field to the node Java and show the date in the HTML, index HTML. This is the format of the date. You can define your own format, and also you have to define the node date when we are just creating the node. In this case, the node will have the date, and we define it from the client side when we are creating the node. And these three changes will be enough for node to be working. For the node date to be stored on the server side, that is because we are using Hibernate below, and it will automatically update the table into the database, and we will be able to store the node. Another one thing is to add the possibility to delete the node. So this is the changes you have to do. This is the new controller method, delete node, and this is the method delete into the AngularJS controller, and here is the new delete button. It will allow you to delete the node. And one more thing, the third exercise is adding search by nodes. So this is the method which you will have to add to the node repository, which will be find the text which is contained inside the node. And then this is the controller method for nodes controller, which will perform the finding by node, by text. And also you will have to add the search field to the HTML, and then you will have to define the search method, scope search. This is search method, and also we are using a HTTP service here, not the REST, but just plain HTTP, and we are using HTTP GET. And we are sending the text as the parameter to the search. And after all, we are updating the list of the nodes. So I highly recommend to work on these exercises, and in this way, you will better understand how these stack of technologies is working. And one more time, this is the most popular and very mature and very feature-rich stack of the technologies, which allows to do a very quick start and still allows to create very complicated applications, because it have the very powerful technologies behind it. And if you will need some more customization, some more specific needs, you always are able to go to the more low level and to implement everything. And on the same way, you are able to have a very big, very quick start by using Spring Boot and Spring Data and AngularJS. Okay, thank you for the attention. I will look at the questions if you have it. This is chat. Questions. Can we pass HTTP keyword directly to service but not a controller in Angular? Yes, we can pass HTTP keyword to service. Yes, sure. What means JPA acronym? JPA is Java Persistence API. This is the standard for accessing the databases in Java by using object relational mapping tools. So the most famous, the standard implementation, the most widely used implementation for JPA is Hibernate. So it allows to work with the objects, and these objects will be automatically mapped to the relative tables in the typical database. And back in REST API, what is the difference between DB and DB data? I don't know what is the difference, DB and DB data. I guess it's the same. Enable auto configuration is used the default configuration file. Yes, this is the default configuration file used, and you can make some changes. Actually, the default configuration file define all the defaults for the typical Spring Boot application. Okay. Is it possible to use Camel for data transportation between different hosts? I have not using the Camel. Don't know. Sorry. Right, scenario in special language calls Sherkin. Okay. Okay. Regarding jQuery and Angular, we have discussed already. Okay, I see no more questions. Okay, thank you for attention. You can write me to email if you need, and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.